Hello, fellow gamers. How are you all doing today? So today I am here with John D'Angelo and David Farland.
Hello.
How are you all doing today?
Good. How's everybody?
I'm fantastic.
That's awesome. And today we're talking about Runelords, the board game. So we have the author of the Runelords book series, which is super amazing, a New York Times best-selling book, and the game designer of the board game. So I'm so happy to have you both here together and just like we can go through how all of this happened, like how all this came together, you know? So let's see here. David, now, do you play board games at all? Do you play games? I'm really curious about that.
I used to do a lot of gaming when I was younger. I ran a big D&D campaign. I actually invented my own RPG and worked with my brother on one that he'd invented, and so I was into that quite a bit, but not as much board games. Once I started having kids, I just didn't have time for it, so I kind of gave it all up for Lent and moved forward, and so that's why we needed somebody like John.
Too much games.
Oh my
Too many
goodness.
games.
Oh my goodness. That is so awesome. I'm so excited about that. Like, you don't even know, because I feel like a lot of authors in general, if they're not looking at RPGs and stuff to like make that creativeness, like, you know, it's like an exercise of creative, like, I don't know, the creative process, right?
Oh, absolutely. When you've got 25 people and you're DMing a game, and you're trying to figure out how to keep all of these different people with their own interests and idea of what they want. You know, one person wants to sneak around and try to see if he can steal something in the dungeon, and there's another one who wants to fight anything that moves, and you know, and then there's the wizard character who's sitting back trying to say, how can I avoid battle? You know, and you're trying to keep everybody happy at once. It's a challenge, and so it's a really good exercise for people who want to be authors.
I know a lot of people that are DMs and GMs for RPGs and stuff that are just going to love hearing what you're saying about all of this. Absolutely. So, okay, so you've done RPGs and everything. Now, some of our base group of people that listen aren't necessarily into just books. They're mostly gamers. So they might not know what the Runelords book series is. So can you give us like a quick little breakdown of like what a Runelord is in general, like, and why we should be so excited about this?
Sure. Let me go back just a second. I forgot to mention that I did do some video game design though, a little bit. I worked on StarCraft Brood War and was the co-design team for that, and I did some other games too. So I've got a little bit more experience in games than I let on, I suppose.
But you really do.
I think that's part of it, because when I started writing the Runelords, I knew that I wanted to create a big fantasy book, but I wanted to have something that had a really cool magic system, something that we hadn't seen before. And so I was looking at a lot of other fantasy books, just looking to see where they got their magic systems from. And I realized that most of them weren't very creative. They were just pulling from various legends and mythologies and that kind of thing. And so the idea came after I'd been thinking about it for about a year. I was just driving down the road one day. I was in Scotland with a friend, and just got this idea for the Runelords. It just kind of felt like it almost all got downloaded into my head at once. I thought, wouldn't it be cool if people could transfer attributes so that you could give somebody your strength or your intelligence or your speed or your beauty, your glamour, and you could never undo it. Okay, you could only give it once, and once you gave it, it stayed with the person who you gave it to until either you or that person died. And basically all of the minutia of how this magic system would work all came to me. But I thought it was a great opportunity to write a really interesting fantasy series that was different from anything else. And that's really what I was hoping for.
I think you definitely pulled it off, because I have to say the Runelords is just one of the most unique, like you say, magic systems that I've heard of, on just being able to take those attributes, and it gives you consequences based off of that. And I love that. I love how that magic basis has those consequences. It's not something you can just use or give freely, like you are going to like transform because of that, And so it makes you, what is it? Gosh, I can't think of the word right now, of course. Like fallible or something, like you can get hurt. So many books have the superheroes like Superman in there, and you're like, man, no, people can get hurt off of these things,
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to have one where there really were, powerful consequences. And so that it created, new moral issues, I guess is the way to think about it, that really kind of echo what goes on in life. When you go to work for somebody, they hire you for one of your attributes. It's either your skills or your wisdom or your strong back or whatever. And you really are giving to them, and ideally they owe you something in return. And too often we don't think about what we as employers owe to those that are giving so much for us. So I was really thinking a lot about those when I started writing it. But of course, I wanted it to be a really cool fantasy world too. So I spent a lot of time developing the world and creating the creatures and the magic systems and the philosophies and all sorts of things. It wasn't just one little thing.
Yeah, the book series is just like such an in-depth like wealth of just like it goes deeper and deeper whenever you're reading the books, It's not a surface level thing. So because of this, whenever I heard there was a Runelords board game, I thought, how are they going to translate that into a board game? Because of all the repercussions that people have as facilitators and stuff like that and going through, and how is that going to come to pass? And did you have reservations about that as well whenever like John came to you and he's like, hey, I want to make a board game?
Well, we talked about it and John was a fan, and I just thought, I think he'll try to capture it. I don't think that you can go as deep into it necessarily in a board game as you can in a book. But at the same time, it's kind of there. And what I was really hoping for was that it would be a really fun game. That's really what it comes down to, because whenever you transfer something from a story in a book into a movie or some other medium, you really just have to ask yourself, does it work in this medium? And I think it does. I was watching John play in a demo last week, and I was thinking, I wish I was sitting there. I wish I could play this game too. And I thought, that's really weird to be the creator of the books and be wishing I could play the game, as badly as I was.
That is so awesome. I was wondering that too, how it was whenever you see like that come to life in a mechanical way. You're like, is this cool? Is this weird? That's awesome.
It really is. It felt somehow incestuous to be wanting that. So,
right. Well, John, like coming from the game designer point of view and everything, did you already have something in mind whenever you came to David on the structure of this? Because imagining something in your head is so much easier than actually making a mechanical process for the story of this, for having the facilitators and pumping up your characters throughout the game. Like, did you have that already set in place?
That actually was one of the cool byproducts of being fortunate enough to have Dave's blessing to be able to move forward with this, because the whole Dedicates Keep section and the way you level up during combat and that kind of thing, all of that was obviously tied very intimately to the story and to the lore of the magic system. But I knew head on, and I had mentioned this to Dave in our first conversations, was because of my background in Unity game design, I really wanted to make a digital, but I knew I wanted it to be a board game. I never had the aspirations of making a AAA crazy Skyrim scale game. I had no delusions of grandeur, but I did want to make a board game. And I knew that Kickstarter was obviously the platform, has been for the better part of a decade now. And so I knew it was viable, that if it didn't work out digitally, I always could go to tabletop. So the roundabout answer to your question is that I had a desire to bridge the gap between a CCG card meta and this oftentimes looked at as unattainable genre of skirmish wargaming, where the average gamer they can't get their head around the financial commitment, the amount of reading that's required, the amount of time it takes to play some of those games. Warhammer games can, regardless of what it says on the box, they could run 4, 5, 6 hours depending on who's playing.
That's why you have a cutoff time for that.
Yeah, so it's crazy. And so we got somebody popping in there. And so I did have a game that I knew I wanted to make, but I just had my fingers crossed that I could do it with Dave's property. And he's just such an easy person to talk to that ended up being, it kind of snowballed pretty quickly.
That's awesome. And hello to our chat today. Our chat's over there commenting away and everything. We appreciate all of you being here. And Petter's super excited. Whenever we first did our Kickstarter show on Runelords, the board game, that was, I mean, David, you should have been there for it. That was Dr. GloryHoundd's whole spiel about like the excitement of the books and how much it meant to him in his life. And I think we sold many, many people on the game at that time because they were like, we want to play as Runelords. And then people went out and bought your books and like, it was crazy.
Well, that's the value of it. I mean, you know, for me, if we've got a great game, it just goes hand in hand with a great book. And, you know, I've got several companies who are expressing interest in doing a TV series, another company that's asking about video games. And, you know, so there may be a lot that we can do with it. We'll just have to see. But I think it all hinges on John here. If we can, it'll all be it.
Oh my goodness, so many spoilers there. That would be amazing having, oh gosh. Oh, you said so much. So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's Hollywood. You know, they're talking about doing stuff all the time. So, you know, you just kind of never get your hopes up too high, but it's always exciting.
So, John, what inspired you to make the basically leveling up system in the game off of that? Like, how did you come with that idea to finally be able to fuse that together, to take the book and go, okay, finally? Because you were talking about CCGs, like, did you pull upon a certain game to kind of help with those mechanics or something?
No, that's an awesome question because that is entirely contributed to the series, that aspect of it, right? Because if I were to say that there was one thing that stuck with me from when I read the books in high school, I only read the first book in high school and then I revisited it much later in life, was vectoring. Vectoring was kind of a this aspect of, you know, and he actually uses the terms, Dave, in the books of like, you know, severing the head of the serpent and that kind of stuff. And you get this concept of like, of somebody being able to vector things off battle to make the person in real time become more powerful. And I can only imagine how terrifying that must be as a foe to be in the middle of fighting somebody and you think you're doing damage, your sword is inflicting wounds, and then suddenly somebody in their base camp decides to give you know, metabolism or fortitude of themselves and vector it. And then suddenly this person's Wolverine on the battlefield and just healing all their wounds right in front of you. And it's like somebody just hits a reset button. And it's kind of terrifying to think in conceptually how cool taking endowments can be mid-combat. And I knew right away, since it was a skirmish game, that would be the focus. How do you experience a Runelord in combat? That should be, if nothing else, that should be what this game encapsulates. And I think that's the direction we went design-wise.
Absolutely. It makes it the most unique game, being able to level up your character as you're playing it like that. It's just completely different. There's no other game that happens. You can't save your character usually in any sort of skirmish game that you're playing. You know, once they're dead or they're close to death, you're like, oh, well, like, I guess you're going to go over there and just die off. We'll arrange these other forces to come help.
Maybe next Saturday.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
But having that ability within the game to go ahead and get an endowment to increase your health, where all of a sudden you have 15 more health. You're like, haha, sucker. Now you have to deal with me plus all these other people here. That's probably one of the most unique things in a skirmish game that I've played, because I mean, I love the skirmish games so much. Now, you also have this beginning journey system. So it's not just a deck that I mean, you can play like a pre-constructed deck, but you also have this journey system that is a deck construction for you. How did you get the idea for that on adding like almost this mini aspect or a mini game to your game?
Well, that also started from our conversation. A lot of how the game formed really started from the initial talks that I had with Dave, because I wanted to make sure that I stayed in my lane. And I think anybody that works in design of any medium that's dealing with an established IP, I think if you're not sensitive to the creator and sensitive to the source material, you're going to create a toxic environment. And I don't think that the final product is ever either going to be the best it can be, or even, you know, supported by the person that created it. So the initial talks that I had about stories specifically was, how are we going to handle the book series in the board game itself? And since both Dave and I agreed that a board game, and he even touched on that a moment ago, that a board game isn't, traditional board games aren't usually the best medium to experience a very deep story, right? So it was sort of like, how do we introduce the core aspects of the mechanics of what a Rune Lord is, get the understanding to a fan base out there of how the cards work and that kind of stuff. Then we can explore the characters, enter into the book series, introduce all those cool characters, and start a legacy campaign that actually tells the stories of the Reavers coming to the surface and getting into farther into the lore and stuff like that. So I had to create like a really sort of, like I mentioned, I always wanted to do a card meta. So I knew there needed to be some sort of deck building involved in order for it to satisfy what I was looking for. So I had to create very quickly this system in my head that would work with that. And Sean, the co-designer, is such like, when I say he's an elite video gamer, I mean, he doesn't want to say this, but this dude is elite level first person shooter RPG, both. So when he came to the table with his ideas, it very quickly streamlined everything into the proper numbers and stuff. So we took this bigger concept, knew we wanted a deck builder, and then knew I wanted story elements to introduce some of the characters, some of the features and locations from the books. So it ended up being this sort of funneled deck building market. That's kind of how it all came about. But really, it started from a place of staying in my lane creatively.
That's awesome. It's fantastic. I love the being able to play it both ways, honestly, because sometimes I don't have time to go ahead and go through the journey portion of it, and I just want to play. And sometimes, like, I want to build a deck of my own, and it puts like some parts of chance in there, and that back and forth with another person with trying to get the right cards before they do and everything. And well, I mean, there's other games on the market. What is it? Warhammer does. There's one series that's like a little bit of cards. It's like in a box. Gosh, what is it?
They have Shadespire and they have
there we go.
Warcry.
Shadespire.
Yeah. Yes.
That's exactly what I was thinking of. They do Shadespire, which, you know, is a little skirmish game with some cards and everything. You're like, oh, this is nice and everything. But those pre-constructed decks, like, you get tired of them after a while. So this way, you never get tired. You can always build something new. Now, I have a question. So are we going to see like a character of David in the game at all? Like, do we ever get a David character?
That would be awesome. Dave, what would you want to be if you could actually be in your book series? Like, would it be a Rune Lord? Would it be a would it be a Wolf Lord? Like, what would you do?
You know, I think I would probably I definitely would want to be a wizard character, you know. So we'd have to figure out how to do that, I suppose.
For sure. I would be a facilitator, no question. That'd be the most cush job ever.
You're like, whatever. Here, you can just take some of that. It's fine.
Nobody would get protected more than a facilitator. It would be
that's
royal
fantastic. Treatment. Oh my goodness. All right, let's see here. So, John, if you had some sort of advice to give gamers who play your game, what sort of advice would that be? Like, do you have a pro-level strategy here?
It would be if you're talking about like they're already at the table and they're about to play. We're talking nuts and bolts strategy. Okay, yes. Right. So I would say to learn the Rune Lord the fastest, the secret is in the recruits, not in the Rune Lord itself. So the knee-jerk reaction would be, how do I get the most out of my specific Rune Lord? You look at its card, you see it's like all of its tactics and stuff like that, and you try and figure it out. But in reality, it's the recruits. Every Rune Lord should play based off of the cards they have in their deck, as opposed to just being fixed, right? Like Craven, for example, the barbarian Wolflord character, he's all about his Force Hounds. But if you're playing the deck builder and you're limited now on how you get wolves of your Force Hounds to the battlefield, you should probably adjust to that with your play style and the runes you actually decide to take and things like that. So I would say first thing to do when you play the Rune Lords is read through the recruits, because that is actually going to dictate how you play the game.
Okay, that's really good advice. So in a few minutes here, we're going to go ahead and open up some questions from our audience. So make sure to get those questions ready whenever you're ready to go ahead, and we're ready to get them. They'll come up on the screen and everything for us. So you kind of hit on this a little bit, John. If you could take one endowment, what would it be?
I've answered this question before, and I every time I answer it, I wonder if it's the right answer. But I think it. I mean, it has to be Glamour. Like, it just has to be. Like,
Glamour, okay.
Glamour just affects. The only downside is that somebody else is. It's if you can take a side, if you get the ethics out, right? Would I take a rune in the first place? That's probably the right question to ask, right? I honestly probably wouldn't take an endowment, because I wouldn't personally be comfortable with the ethics involved. But if I had to, I think Glamour.
Glamour, okay.
Yeah.
David, if you could take an endowment, what would it be?
That's an interesting one, because I think over time that answer has probably changed. I think as a younger person, I would have liked wit, and maybe that would still be it. But I'd certainly, having being getting older, I'm looking at it and going, I'd certainly like to age beautifully. So I could use a higher constitution, I suppose, is what it comes down to.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Yeah.
So a little bit of sprinkling, like a little bit of wit in your youth, and a little bit of constitution over here.
Yeah. So Dave, you would have a full-on keep. That's what you're saying. You would have you would require a full-on Dedicate's keep.
Absolutely. And why just stop at one? Why not 10,000?
Why stop at one, right?
Let's see
Especially
here.
with social media, right? Like, that would redefine what a follower actually is, right? Think about some of these social media influencers. How many endowments they could probably get. It'd be crazy.
That's right. Yeah.
So Hexy Vista saying, yeah, having both options for one-off campaign play is always a good thing. Oh, we didn't talk about the campaign portion of this. So John, can you give us a little insight into that portion? Because I know that we played sort of the skirmish style battle. And how does the campaign portion of it work?
So in the first Kickstarter campaign that we did, we offered a legacy play, and we talked about it. And we had we were going to do individual campaigns that were strung together with multiple stories that played out through the deck builder and the locations that you would travel in the cards and things like that. And when you hit an actual encounter, you would, instead of just doing card battle, you would pull out the given tile to set it up and do a skirmish. And it would lead to ultimately a big boss battle at the end, right? So that was how we were going to handle campaign play. However, it just so happens that more is not always better when it comes to Kickstarter, because while you might hear rumblings of how this game doesn't offer enough, the replayability isn't great. The truth of the matter is when you offer too much, you run the risk of people thinking you're trying to be too many things, and that backfires on you. So no matter how balanced and how many years you put into it, that doesn't matter. It's the perception, the optics of the situation. So the reason I say all of that is because this campaign, we lessened the amount of content so that we can make it a little bit more bite-sized, a little bit more consumable when you actually experience it for the first time. So we put legacy play off, but we didn't give up on the one-shot scenarios called adventures. And those are still in the game. Those can be played solo or cooperative. You just read the rules of the scenario and try and solve the puzzle. And there are numerous ones in the core set. And then, of course, we had some slated for stretch goals and things like that. So, but legacy play and campaign mode, 100% is fully designed and ready to go. And we would have loved to have been able to implement it. But it's probably better this way, because if we're fortunate enough to get the game to market, we don't have to do Vera and Craven's story. We could just jump right into book 1 and just and start handling things properly.
My goodness, that would be fantastic.
Yeah,
oh
just
my
another
goodness.
way to experience the Runelords series. Yeah.
Well, I really like the fact that it is open. Like, you start with this base set of characters and everything, and your scenarios and stuff that you can go through. And it's almost like learning how to use all the aspects of the game, and then, but it's totally 100% open for like all sorts of upgrades. Like, I can see all the different characters having all their own decks and everything, and being able to really open that all up, you know, after you get funded and everything. That would be fantastic. Like, oh my gosh. And if anybody wants to know, this is on Kickstarter right now. So if you are interested in the Runelords and you want to take a look at the game, go ahead and head on over to the Kickstarter after this and look at all the fun stuff. And it's at a fantastic price too. Whenever I saw that it was like a skirmish game, what was it? It was at 49?
49, yeah, 49 for a skirmish, yeah. 49 for a skirmish. First
could
unlock
not
is another
believe it.
Runelord too, yeah.
Could not believe the pricing on that. It was insane. I don't know the last time I've only spent $49 on a skirmish game. Like, those are usually like $60+ because like it's a lot of content and everything.
Mhm.
And in this particular game, the way that you did the action system and everything with flipping over those little tokens and stuff like that, it made such a great experience on the board where you could keep track of everything. I'm sorry, I'm going to like geek out about the whole miniature sort of thing because of all the skirmish games that I've played in the past. I really enjoy the action system that you come up with, John, because it's so easy to keep track of all your characters on the board without having a gajillion cards and everything on top of everybody, and like all this like everything is just so nice and simply put together. You just flip over some tokens and that's what you do.
Every step of the way, Sean and I, every single time we implemented something, it was, does this make sense to somebody that doesn't play heavy games? And that was what Sean and I, every time we made a decision, that was the deal breaker. Like, if you don't play heavy games, is this going to put you off? So that's been our goal since day one. Yeah,
absolutely. It's very easy to get into for non-skirmish players. The doctor is not a huge fan of miniature games. I'm the skirmish player, and it was so easy to sit down and teach it to him. I'm just like, look at this token, and then look at this symbol over here. I'm like, and you flip the token, and ta-da, things happen.
It's done.
Right?
Do you have any more actions? No? Then stop playing that character.
Right? Then
Move
stop
on.
doing things.
Yeah, when I was watching it the other night, that was my thought. I was looking at it and I was going, you know, they did a really good job of designing this game to be easy to walk into and play it really quickly. You know, I think that was my biggest fear. And I just have to say hats off to John, because it looked incredibly fun, and I could see how it was really variable at the same time expandable. There's just some really good solid design there, but you know, you make them work on it for several years and they really come up with something
eventually
good.
It comes out 4 years on one thing, and it better be ironed out to some degree. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. I really appreciate you both showing up and talking to me about Runelords, the board game. I hope you get funded super soon, because I had so much fun playing this game. Like, just learning more. Like, I did not read the entire Runelords book series. I know I feel so bad with the author being here. I'm so sorry. I didn't read all your books yet. Okay.
Yeah.
But
we're working on it. So.
Right. Playing the game and having that experience made me want to learn more about the books and everything, because of all the unique things that were happening in it. But I can see how vice versa. You're a fan of the books, and coming into it, you want to play that Runelord. I mean, you know, like we said, minus all the moral stuff. I mean, you know, you still want to be a super awesome, powerful character in a game.
Oh, it's dark. It is dark, and there's a lot of the fans of the book series. They come out and I see it in comments all the time. Somebody would be like, "Oh, you need to experience the book series. Oh, I'm reading book 1. Oh, I'm reading book 2," and that's a really cool interaction. But the real hardcore fans will jump in and they will say it right away. They'll be like, "Just be prepared, because this isn't entirely lighthearted, fun stuff. There are people." Really sacrificing themselves to give power to people, and Dave does an incredible job of like pulling back the curtain. He doesn't just show the powerful Rune Lord. He really wants you to know what somebody is going through in order for this being to protect their lands, or sometimes conquer their lands. But full disclosure, nothing in the board game comes even close to how epic Rajatan is. It's not even close. Like, we hope to get there, obviously, when we expand. But if you really want the ultimate Rune Lord, you got to read the books.
Well, I thought it was really cool. You kind of see that a little bit in the fact that you have several characters out on the board, and you can like sacrifice one of them in order to take that endowment, which is so crazy. It's like if you're within the last part of your health or something, or you need that right now, like you're able to do that and then play with that Rune Lord next turn. It's like it's a chef's kiss with all of it put together, you two. Like the lore and then it translating to the mechanics of the board game. I don't know how you put it all together, but it's fantastical.
I actually had a quick question. Do you mind if I ask Dave a quick question before we record?
Yeah.
So Dave, obviously I could have asked you this in private, but it crossed my mind and I wanted to ask you here. So if we're fortunate enough to see the Rune Lord series make it to the screen of any size, right? If we're fortunate enough, how do you think would be the best way to represent Glamour on screen? How would we pull that off? I'm just curious. It would obviously be acting, right? The actors would have to react, but I'm curious.
I think that's a lot of it. One of the things about Glamour is that it isn't just physical beauty; it's charisma. And I'd like to say that, you know, it's not all people who have a lot of charisma are beautiful. For many of them, there's just something about them that makes you want to be around them. And so I think that we would have to do a combination of probably special effects along with makeup and things like that. We had some real discussions. We had Warner Brothers that was looking at doing a movie a few years back, and so we had some long discussions about how we would handle that. You know, because if a character loses glamour, we have Iomi losing glamour, and the question was, you know, how are we going to show that? And you're going to have her going around through this entire movie in an ugly mask or something. And
it's true. Like when you read, it's like exactly that whole no spoilers there. Iomi doesn't lose anything. No spoilers.
Oh my goodness. Oh, you know what? We do have a question here. So Petter asks for David, what is your favorite board game or RPG? Because if you play more RPGs, I can see how maybe that might be your favorite.
That's a good question. Like I say, I haven't played war games or board games for so long. My brother and I used to play a number of them, and I hate to even mention what they were because it would date me so badly. But it was back before the flood, you know, I really. Really, quite frankly, I was more into role-playing games, and there was a game that was called the Advanced Wizard RPG, and probably none of you have ever heard about it, you know. But we took that and we used the combat rules for that, and then created our own game and with its own spells and stuff like that. And so most of the time when I was playing games, I was playing things that I invented.
That's awesome. Like, I love that you just a homegrown like RPG'd your way out of everything. That's awesome. It's so much fun.
It plays so well into your success too. It just
right.
Does not surprise me at all that you've been telling stories before you were telling stories. It's like, yeah.
Well, it gives all those RPG authors out there, like, I feel like a little bit more like, okay, you could write a book. Like, you could take your world that you've invested so much in and your homegrown RPG, and you could make it something if you want. Because I love RPGs. Like, my favorite has been Vampire the Masquerade because of interactions, like political interactions and intrigue of everything. That's my favorite part of it. And, you know, you get those people who have all these homegrown RPGs and everything. I'm just like, wow, you guys are amazing. You come up with such great stuff. Like, just go another extra bit and like put it into a book, like make it into a book, because I love hearing about all these worlds. And it's so, it's so fantastic. So John, I have a question for you. So what's your favorite board game then?
I gotta say Mansions of Madness is probably my favorite board game.
That's awesome.
And the reason that I say it is because I'm a big Mythos fan. And I've been a Mythos fan since I was a teenager. I've been a H.P. Lovecraft fan. And over the last 15 years, you've seen a big surge of a lot of, especially in the board game community, arguably too many Cthulhu games now, arguably. Well. But I like Mansions of Madness because I'm able to, it stimulates my imagination in just the right amount, from components, visuals, to being able, and also the interactivity with the app I personally like. But yeah, I think that's probably the, if you were going for like a regular, if you're talking about a one-off, I just want to play a quick board game, it's Ink and Gold is my favorite.
Ink and Gold, okay.
Ink and Gold is my favorite fast. I want to play 15 games in a row. It's going to be Ink and Gold.
Let's see here. Hexy says, yes, I love Mansions. Let's see here. Brandon says, StarCraft is such a classic game. How did you get the influence on the Zerg characters? I believe that's a question for David.
Yeah, well, the Zerg lurkers actually came from the Runelords. I had written Brotherhood of the Wolf and was working with a little company in Utah, and we sat down and we were talking about making a video game, and they said, well, you got to have some credits as a video game designer in order to if we're going to get the Runelords made. And so we sat down and we started talking about it. And anyway, I wrote up a proposal for StarCraft Brood War and got it accepted the next day. And all of a sudden I had this job as a video game designer. And one of the things I talked about was, I was like, I've got these creatures called Reavers in my Runelords books, and we could maybe do something fun with using that idea. And so they were actually based upon the Reavers out of my Runelords books. And
oh my goodness,
so
that's
just
awesome.
Crossed over rather nicely.
Once you know that now, any StarCraft player is gonna be like, oh wow, there's the world worm. The way they deploy the Zerg onto the battlefield is so much a world worm. It's great. There's a lot of similarities once you know that information.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you probably opened up like a lot of people's eyes to that, just going, what? Or, even so the other way, going, wait a second, I can learn more about this. Like, that'll be fantastic. Oh my gosh.
Actually, Dave, if you don't mind me asking, why did you make the Fel Mage so much smaller? Why is the Fel Mage being so much more powerful? Why is the Fel Mage smaller in design? Was there a particular reason for that, or?
No, I can't remember what my thinking was.
It makes them stand apart for sure. So that was a good enough answer going in. But I was wondering if it's because they generated from a different species of Reavers or something. I didn't know if there was a reason for that.
They were a different subspecies. I'll put it that way. When you get into creatures of the underworld, I created this entire underworld with Reavers and Mordants and other creatures, and we never really get into it. The people who are living up on the surface don't go down there. Okay.
No.
So yeah, it's really rather foolish. So the ones that don't come back. So a lot of the creatures didn't even have names, in as far as most people would know. And so, but yeah, there are a number of different species of Reavers. And I remember at one time that I was like, yeah, I've got about 100 different subspecies, and they basically call anything big from the underworld a Reaver. So we have some that look like giant caterpillars, and we have other ones that look like giant spiders, and we have the Reavers, and and that was what was going on there. The Scarlet Sorcerers are just a little bit of different subspecies from the others. They all communicate using scent, the smell. Okay, and the Scarlet Sorceress was actually better at duplicating the smells created by other creatures so that they could communicate and basically command other creatures in the underworld. That's a key that I don't think everything gets into the book. You know, you just have to know that stuff.
No, that's so cool though. Yeah, but it was handy you have it in the back of your head when you're writing, I bet. Yeah. You need to know those little details, right? You need to know where you're living.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, people are like, the lurkers or reavers passing out in chat, like so excited. Well, you know, I didn't even think about this portion of it. David, do you play video games at all? Like, do you have any video games that you play?
You know, I really don't anymore. I mean,
Yeah.
I literally am so busy. I run a writing contest, one of the world's largest writing contests, and I'm the lead judge for that. And then right now I'm teaching 200 students because I'd like to help other writers. And then there's my own writing going on and stuff. So anytime that I start to play a video game, my wife comes and nags at me. So I don't get to play video games anymore. I do write for them. I just did a story for PUBG, for PUBG Battlegrounds, and that'll be coming out in another 4 to 6 weeks, something like that. But it'll be a 5-part story or 6-part story that'll be coming out there.
That's awesome. Well, you know what, David, where can we find you at? Because apparently, you know, you also teach people and stuff, authors that want to go ahead and learn more about being an author and everything. Where can we find you at?
Oh, just come to mystorydoctor.com and sign up for my newsletter. And when you do, you can sign up to get a free book of some of my favorite tips that I've given out over the last 15 years for writers. So there's a 400 page book that you can get of some of my favorite writing advice, and just do that.
I mean, I mean, he doesn't know that I follow up on the newsletter as much as I do, but I have a screenplay that I've been working on in-house here, and he just recently put up a topic basically asking how real do you want your world to be? That's basically the concept of it. And reading through that unlocked immediately so many ways for me to build some of the world building I was doing in my screenplay. It's amazing how fast a newsletter, just a quick injection of information, you know, X amount of times a week, or even once a week, can just sort of keep your mind fresh and prevent you from getting into your own habits. So yeah, but that was a really helpful topic, by the way, David.
Well, thank you.
I should have thanked you directly, but it helped me a lot.
I'm gonna have to sign up for the newsletter then, because that sounds fantastic. I love world building stuff, so like that would be fantastic. And John, where can we find you and your lovely Kickstarter at?
So everything social is at the Runelords BG. The Runelords BG. That's all social. And then Regin Pro is the Twitch. So if we're doing live playthroughs on Friday, this particular Friday is going to be a Q&A, but I'm going to have TTS up in case anybody has any questions. I can run through the rules really quickly. And then the Kickstarter is currently live. And I wish I could just say the entire.
We should have a link in the description. Yeah, we should have a link in the description. If it's not there, I'm going to go back and check and double check and make sure it is there. But I'm pretty sure I put it in there, so you can go ahead and head on down there. Now, if you all want to.
I should say too, I just realized if you're not a writer, I do have a website, www.davidfarland.com. I have a book that I'm putting up for free of short stories, along with an original short story that's coming out. It should be up tomorrow. So
really,
you can go sign up to be on my newsletter there, and there's a free book that's coming on with about 300 pages of short fiction. So yeah. I'm just
free stuff. Everybody loves free stuff.
Free stuff. Absolutely.
All the free stuff. Give all the free stuff.
All I want is your soul. Yeah.
Well, hold on a second. I thought we said free. Oh, thank you so much. It was so nice chatting with both of you and everything. And I'm so I love the board game so much. I'm so interested in learning more about the Runelords book series. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to our chat for hanging out and leaving us some questions and everything today. We really, really appreciate that. And we will see all of you later. All right. Bye.
Bye. Take care.